I was called into HR on a Monday morning that reeked of cheap coffee and false promises. Linda Pearson's smile stretched like plastic wrap across her face. "Perhaps you should take a long vacation," she said, her manicured nails tapping against my file. "To realign yourself." But that vacation wasn't something I could afford. Not with Mom's medical bills, not with student loans crushing my windpipe. They knew that. They counted on it. And from that precise moment, sitting in that sterile office with its motivational posters mocking me from the walls, my plan for revenge began to take root. My name is Rachel Morgan, and at 34, I'd become another casualty of corporate America's grinding machinery. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:47 a.m. in my cramped apartment on the outskirts of Havenbrook, where the walls were thin enough to hear my neighbor's alarm through the drywall and the radiator clanged like it was fighting for its life. The commute to Westlake Connect took an hour and 15 minutes on a good day. 2 buses and a 10-minute walk through a business district that sparkled with glass towers I'd never afford to live in. I'd been the data management specialist at Westlake for 6 years. 6 years of arriving first, leaving last, and watching my workload multiply like cancer cells while my salary remained stubbornly stagnant. My desk sat in the middle of the 3rd floor, strategically placed where everyone could dump their problems, but far enough from the windows that natural light was just a rumor. The fluorescent bulbs above flickered with a frequency that gave me headaches by noon. The student loans from my master's degree ate $1,847 every month, more than my rent. I'd done the math once, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of wine that cost $7.99, and realized I'd be 53 when I finally paid them off. That was assuming nothing went wrong. But things always went wrong, didn't they? Like Mom's diagnosis last spring. Chronic kidney disease, the doctor said, handing us pamphlets about treatment options that might as well have been written in gold ink for what they cost. At Westlake, I managed databases for the entire eastern region, though my official title suggested I was just one cog in a larger machine. When Jennifer quit last year, they divided her work between me and nobody. When Marcus had his breakdown in the bathroom, we all heard him sobbing through the vents and never came back. Guess who inherited his projects? My supervisor, Tom Bradley, would lean against my cubicle partition, coffee breath wafting over me, and say things like, "You're so efficient, Rachel, a real team player." Team player, corporate speak for sucker. The performance reviews were the worst joke. Meets expectations, they'd write, while I exceeded every metric they threw at me. But exceeding metrics didn't translate to exceeding paychecks. It translated to more work, tighter deadlines, and weekend emails marked urgent that were never actually urgent, just tests to see who was desperate enough to respond. I'd watch the executives stride past in their $1,000 suits, talking about their weekend homes in the Berkshires, while I calculated whether I could afford both groceries and Mom's medication copays this month. The company newsletter would arrive in our inboxes every Friday, full of buzzwords about work-life balance and employee wellness, usually right after they'd denied another request for additional staff. The break room had motivational posters. Teamwork. Together everyone achieves more, overlooking a coffee maker that hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration and a refrigerator where lunches went to die. I'd eat my peanut butter sandwich at my desk most days, scrolling through medical bills on my phone, each one a small heart attack in PDF format. 3 weeks ago, they'd started the Optimization Initiative. We all knew what that meant. Brad from accounting was the first to go, 23 years with the company reduced to a cardboard box and a security escort. Then Patricia from customer service, her desk cleaned out while she was at lunch, as if she'd never existed at all. But I was safe. I thought I was essential. I was the one who knew where all the data bodies were buried, who could navigate the legacy systems that held this technological house of cards together. I was wrong. In corporate America, nobody's essential. We're all just lines on a spreadsheet. And when the numbers need massaging, some lines get erased. That Monday morning would change everything, though I didn't know it yet as I sat at my desk. Fingers flying across the keyboard, fixing another crisis that someone higher up had created and I'd inevitably have to solve without recognition or thanks. The email from HR popped up at 9:43 a.m. Please see me at your earliest convenience. Linda Pearson. Earliest convenience, another corporate euphemism. It meant now, it meant drop everything. It meant your life was about to change, and not for the better. The walk to HR felt like a death march through cubicle purgatory. Linda Pearson's office smelled like vanilla air freshener trying to mask something rotten. She sat behind her desk, that plastic smile already in place, her blazer so sharp it could cut glass. The walls were covered with certificates of HR excellence and photos from company retreats I'd never been invited to. Rachel, please, sit down, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. The leather squeaked when I sat, breaking the silence like a confession. How are you doing? The question was rhetorical. She didn't care about my mother's dialysis appointments or my anxiety medication that I couldn't afford to refill. She shuffled papers, a performance of concern, before launching into the speech she'd probably rehearsed in the mirror that morning. We've been reviewing your recent performance, she began, though my last review was 6 months ago and marked satisfactory across the board. And we're concerned about your well-being. My well-being, I almost laughed. When I worked 14-hour days during the server migration, nobody worried about my well-being. When I covered for 3 people during the holiday season, my well-being was irrelevant. The management team feels, and I agree, that you might benefit from taking some extended time off, a long vacation, if you will, to realign yourself with your personal goals and wellness. The words hung in the air like smog. I knew this game. They called it a vacation, but it was an execution in slow motion. Unpaid leave, of course. A soft push toward the exit door. How long of a vacation? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake in my chest. Oh, indefinite, Linda said, waving her hand as if discussing the weather. Until you feel ready to return, we want you to take all the time you need to recuperate. Recuperate from what? From doing the job of 3 people? From saving their asses every quarter when the data integrity went to hell? The fluorescent light above us hummed, casting shadows that made Linda's face look skeletal. This is effective immediately? I asked. We think it's best if you start today. For your own benefit. She slid a folder across the desk. Here's information about your options during your leave. I opened it. Cobra Insurance Continuation, $1,847 per month. Exactly what my student loans cost. It wasn't a coincidence. They'd done the math, calculated exactly how fast I'd bleed out financially. Linda, I said, leaning forward. We both know I can't afford unpaid leave. I have obligations. My mother. The company offers many resources for financial planning, she interrupted, pulling out a pamphlet about budgeting that looked like it was designed for children. Perhaps this time off will allow you to reassess your financial priorities. My financial priorities. Keeping my mother alive was a financial priority. Having a roof over my head was a financial priority. This wasn't about my well-being or my performance. This was about pushing me out without having to pay severance, without having to admit they were downsizing. Make the employee quit. And you don't have to explain anything to the shareholders. What if I don't want to take this vacation? I asked. Linda's smile flickered, just for a second, like a glitch in her programming. I'm afraid it's not optional, Rachel. The management has decided this is what's best for everyone involved. You can consider it a sabbatical, if that helps. A sabbatical. Another pretty word for abandonment. I thought about the emails I'd sent last week, begging for additional resources, warning about system vulnerabilities that needed immediate attention, all ignored. Now I understood why. You'll need to turn in your badge and laptop before you leave today. Linda continued, checking items off a list. Security will escort you to clean out your desk. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. Like I was a criminal. 6 years of loyalty reduced to a security escort and a cardboard box. I stood up, the chair squeaking again, this time sounding like a scream. This is constructive dismissal, I said quietly. You know that, right? Linda's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Fear? Recognition? We're simply concerned about your wellness, Rachel. This is a gift, really. Time to focus on yourself. A gift. Like poverty was a gift. Like watching my mother suffer because I couldn't afford better care was a gift. I wanted to sweep everything off her desk, to scream until the windows shattered, but I didn't. I just nodded, picked up the folder with its insulting pamphlets, and walked to the door. Rachel, Linda called out as I reached for the handle. We hope you'll use this time productively. Sometimes a break is exactly what we need to gain perspective. I turned back to look at her, sitting there in her ergonomic chair, in her office with a view, with her salary that probably doubled mine. You're right, Linda, I said. This will definitely give me perspective. 20 minutes later, security watched as I packed 6 years into a box. A photo of Mom from healthier days. A coffee mug that said, World's Okayest Employee. A Secret Santa gift that felt prophetic now. My emergency stash of peanut butter crackers. The nameplate from my desk went in last. Rachel Morgan in fading gold letters, already forgotten. As the security guard escorted me through the lobby, past the abstract art that cost more than my annual salary, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. I looked like a ghost already, holding my cardboard box like a coffin for my career. But ghosts, I realized, had one advantage: nobody saw them coming for revenge. The first week without income hit like withdrawal. I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, doing the mathematics of desperation. Rent, $1,200. Mom's medications, $340 after insurance. Groceries, $200 if I lived on ramen and eggs. Utilities, $150. Student loans, $1,847. The numbers mocked me. Adding up to more than the zero in my checking account would become in exactly 43 days. I applied for 17 jobs that first week. Each application took 2 hours, tailoring resumes, writing cover letters that begged without sounding like begging. The automated responses came back within minutes. Thank you for your interest. We'll keep your resume on file. Corporate speak for, you'll never hear from us again. The unemployment office was a fluorescent purgatory that smelled like despair and industrial disinfectant. The woman behind the bulletproof glass looked at my claim with dead eyes. Says here you took voluntary leave, she said, tapping her screen. That disqualifies you from benefits. It wasn't voluntary. That's what your employer reported. You can appeal. But it takes 12 to 16 weeks. 12 to 16 weeks. Mom needed dialysis 3 times a week, starting now. I found a night shift at O'Malley's Bar on Crescent Street, a dive that served watered-down beer to people who'd given up pretending their lives were going anywhere. The manager, Pete, had tattoos crawling up his neck and paid cash under the table. You're overqualified, he said, looking at my application. You'll leave as soon as something better comes up. Nothing better is coming up, I told him. And he hired me on the spot because he recognized the particular flavor of defeat in my voice. The shifts ran from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. I'd stumble home as the sun came up, sleep until noon, then spend the afternoon applying for jobs that didn't exist or didn't want me. My feet ached from standing on sticky floors, my hands cracked from constant washing of glasses, my back screamed from carrying cases of beer up from the basement. Mom called less frequently. She knew something was wrong, but was too proud to ask directly. I can skip a few treatments, she offered during one conversation. The doctor said, no. I cut her off. You're not skipping anything. I sold my good interview suit on Craigslist for $75. The buyer, a young woman starting her first corporate job, looked so hopeful it made my chest hurt. I wanted to warn her, to tell her about the Linda Pearsons of the world, but I just took the cash and wished her luck. Friends evaporated like morning dew. Sarah stopped texting after I declined 3 coffee dates I couldn't afford. Marcus from my old team reached out once. Heard what happened. That sucks. Let's grab drinks sometime. Sometime never came. They still had jobs, mortgages, normal problems. I'd become a cautionary tale, something contagious they might catch if they got too close. The second month, the collection calls started. Student loan services called 6 times a day. I developed a game. How many different ways could they phrase, "You owe us money," before I hung up? The record was 14 variations in a single call. Mom ended up in the ER on a Tuesday. Kidney infection, they said. Preventable if she'd been getting proper treatment. The bill came to $12,000 after insurance. I sat in the hospital parking lot, looking at the invoice, and laughed until I cried, then cried until I threw up. Pete started scheduling me for doubles, 16-hour shifts that blurred together in a haze of spilled beer and broken glass. A regular, Tommy, liked to philosophize at 2 a.m. The system's rigged, he'd slur, nursing his fifth whiskey. They squeeze you dry, then act surprised when there's nothing left. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that hard work paid off, that the American dream was still alive somewhere, but I just poured his sixth whiskey and took his tip money. My apartment started falling apart in sympathy. The refrigerator died first, spoiling a week's worth of carefully budgeted groceries. The landlord said he'd fix it when he got around to it. The hot water went next, turning every shower into a test of endurance. Then the heat started cutting out at night, and I'd wrap myself in every blanket I owned, wondering if this was what giving up felt like. I ran into Jennifer, my old coworker who'd quit before everything went bad, at a grocery store. She was buying organic vegetables and wine that didn't come in a box. "Rachel, how are you? I heard you left Westlake. Good for you. That place was toxic." "Yeah," I said, holding my basket of generic pasta and the cheapest sauce on sale. "Really toxic." She talked about her new job, her recent promotion, her upcoming vacation to Costa Rica. Real vacation, the kind you choose, the kind you can afford. I smiled and nodded and died a little more, inside with each word. That night, after a particularly brutal shift where a drunk customer threw a beer bottle that missed my head by inches, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot and did the math one more time. At this rate, I had maybe 2 weeks before complete financial collapse. 2 weeks before I'd have to choose between keeping a roof over my head or keeping Mom alive. The radio played some motivational speaker talking about hitting rock bottom and nowhere to go but up. I turned it off. Rock bottom, I was learning, had a basement, and that basement had a sub-basement, and I was still falling. But somewhere in that fall, in that 4 a.m. darkness with my hands still sticky from beer and my feet screaming in my worn-out shoes, something else started growing. Not hope. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford. Something harder, sharper. Rage. The night I met Jordan Hale, someone had just vomited in the men's bathroom, and Pete was making me clean it up because I had the smallest hands to reach behind the toilet. I was on my knees, scrubbing strangers' bile at 1 a.m. when I heard a voice behind me. "That's a health code violation, making employees clean biohazard without proper equipment." I turned around to see a guy in his early 30s, wearing a wrinkled button-down that had seen better days, nursing a beer at the bar. Not drunk, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from fighting battles you'll lose. "Yeah, well," I said, peeling off the rubber gloves. "Health codes are for places that care about staying in business longer than next month." He laughed, bitter and knowing. "Jordan Hale," he said, extending his hand. "Labor attorney. Well, former labor attorney. Current drinker of cheap beer and fighter of losing battles." Over the next hour, between serving other customers, Jordan told me his story. He'd been working for a nonprofit, representing employees getting screwed by their companies. Budget cuts killed the program. Now he did freelance document review, the legal equivalent of my bar shifts, soul-crushing work that barely paid the bills. "You know what the worst part is?" he said, working on his third beer. "I've seen your story 100 times. Different faces, same ending. Companies figured out the loophole. Can't fire someone without cause. Make their life hell until they quit. Can't lay them off without severance. Call it a voluntary leave of absence and starve them out. Westlake Connect," I said quietly. "That's who did it to me." Jordan's eyes sharpened, suddenly sober. Westlake? Jesus. They're infamous for this. I had 3 cases against them before the nonprofit folded. They've got it down to a science. HR probably has a playbook. How to eliminate employees without legal liability. Chapter and verse. He pulled out his phone, started scrolling through old files. Look at this. Maria Santos, forced out 2 years ago. Same story. Extended wellness leave. She lost her house, David Park, last year. Sabbatical for personal growth. His wife left him when they couldn't afford IVF anymore. Rebecca Thompson. Rebecca from accounting, I interrupted. They told us she retired early. Retired at 42? Sure. After they made her work environment so toxic she was having panic attacks in the parking lot. My hands were shaking as I poured his next beer. All those empty desks, all those cardboard boxes, all those colleagues who just decided to pursue other opportunities. It wasn't random, it was systematic. The thing is, Jordan continued, individually, these cases are hard to prove. Constructive dismissal is tricky. But if you could show a pattern, prove it's a deliberate strategy. He trailed off, staring at his beer like it held answers. How many cases would you need? I asked. Dozens. With documentation, emails, memos, recordings if you're in a one-party consent state, which we are. You'd need someone on the inside, or someone with access to... He stopped, looking at me. You had access to the systems, didn't you? Data management. Had, I said. Past tense. But you know the systems. You know where the bodies are buried, digitally speaking. Pete yelled at me to stop chatting and serve the guy at the end of the bar. When I came back, Jordan had pulled out a legal pad, sketching something. Look, I can't tell you to do anything illegal, he said carefully. But if you happen to have any personal emails where they discussed your situation, or if you happen to remember specific conversations, or if you happen to know other employees who experienced similar treatment. Hypothetically, I said, purely hypothetically, a class action suit against Westlake would be worth millions. The publicity alone would tank their stock. And the discovery process? God. The discovery process would be beautiful. Every dirty secret, every hidden memo, dragged into the light. But you'd need a lawyer for that, a lawyer with money for filing fees, depositions, expert witnesses. Jordan smiled. And for the first time, it wasn't bitter. You'd need a lawyer angry enough to work on contingency. Someone with nothing left to lose and a serious grudge against corporate America. He slid his business card across the bar. It was homemade, printed on cheap cardstock. Hypothetically, of course. I picked up the card. Of course. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street, he said, standing up, leaving a 20 for a $10 tab. Neutral territory, good Wi-Fi, terrible coffee, but they don't care if you sit there all day. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to discuss employment law and happened to bring documentation about systematic workplace discrimination, Tuesday mornings are pretty quiet. After he left, I stood there holding his card, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not hope. Hope was still too expensive. But possibility. The rage that had been eating me alive suddenly had a target, a purpose. I thought about Linda Pearson's plastic smile, about Tom Bradley's condescending lean against my cubicle, about the executives talking about their beach houses while I rationed insulin for my mother. I thought about Maria Santos losing her house, David Park's marriage crumbling, Rebecca Thompson having panic attacks in her car. That night, after my shift, I didn't go straight home. I drove past Westlake Connect's building, dark except for the security lights that made it look like a prison. My badge might be deactivated, but my memory wasn't. 6 years of passwords, system backdoors, and administrator credentials that IT never bothered to change because who pays attention to the data management specialist? I sat in my car, Jordan's card in my hand, and made a decision. They wanted me to disappear, to fade away quietly into poverty and desperation. They counted on my shame, my isolation, my financial desperation to keep me silent. They calculated wrong. The next Tuesday. I walked into that coffee shop with a flash drive in my pocket and 6 years of memories that were about to become evidence. Jordan was already there, legal pad ready, a gleam in his eye that matched the fury in mine. Hypothetically, I said, sitting down, where would we start? He smiled like a shark sensing blood. Hypothetically, we'd start by burning Westlake Connect to the ground. Legally speaking, of course. Of course. The performance started immediately. I sent Linda Pearson an email dripping with defeat. Thank you for the opportunity to reflect on my career path. This time off has given me valuable perspective. Her response came within minutes. So glad to hear you're embracing this journey of self-discovery. I wanted to vomit, but instead I printed the email. Evidence file number 1. Jordan had given me a list. We need patterns, he'd said. Names, dates, documentation. So I became an actress worthy of an Oscar, reaching out to former colleagues with carefully crafted messages. Just checking in. How are things at Westlake? Miss you all. The responses revealed everything: stress, fear, and most importantly, names of others who'd recently taken voluntary leave. The real treasure came from my old login credentials. Westlake's IT department, in their infinite incompetence, hadn't deactivated my access to the cloud backup system. A separate system from the main network, probably forgotten in their rush to escort me out. Every night, after my bar shift, I'd download files. Email threads between executives discussing Operation Lean Staffing. Spreadsheets, calculating insurance savings from workforce optimization. A PowerPoint presentation titled Legal Risk Mitigation in Strategic Separations. I recorded everything, every conversation, every phone call. My phone became my weapon, always recording when I called HR, just to clarify my leave status. Linda's voice, patronizing and sweet. Remember, Rachel, this is your choice. We're simply supporting your decision to prioritize wellness. Finding the others was like assembling a jury of the damned. Through LinkedIn, Facebook, carefully worded messages, I tracked them down. Maria Santos worked 3 jobs now, cleaning offices at night. David Park had moved back with his parents at 45. Rebecca Thompson was on anxiety medication that she rationed because she couldn't afford full doses. We met in Jordan's apartment, a studio that made mine look luxurious. 7 of us crowded around his folding table, sharing stories that sounded like variations of the same nightmare. Each person brought evidence, emails, recordings, performance reviews that mysteriously tanked right before their voluntary departures. They called me into HR on my birthday, Maria said, showing us the email timestamp. Said I seemed disconnected from the company culture. David pulled out his phone. I recorded my exit interview. Listen to this. Linda's voice filled the room, suggesting that perhaps David's personal challenges were affecting his work. That time off would be beneficial. His personal challenge? His wife's miscarriage, which he'd mentioned in confidence to his supervisor. The smoking gun came from Rebecca. She'd been friends with an HR coordinator, Ashley, who'd quit in disgust. Ashley had forwarded Rebecca an internal memo before leaving. Strategic Workforce Reduction Protocol. It outlined exactly how to pressure employees into voluntary separation while avoiding legal liability. Target older employees, those with health issues, anyone using too much insurance. Make their workload unbearable, isolate them socially, then offer the gift of unpaid leave. Jordan's hands shook as he read it. This is evidence of conspiracy. This isn't just constructive dismissal. This is systematic discrimination, ERISA violations, possible RICO implications if we can prove financial fraud. But we needed more. We needed current information, proof that this was ongoing. That's when I suggested something that made everyone nervous. I still have friends inside, people who hate what's happening but can't afford to leave. Sarah Martinez, from IT. She'd sent me a sympathy text after I was forced out. Tom Kumar, from Finance, who'd warned me something was coming but couldn't say what. Jennifer Liu, from Legal, who'd been leaving cryptic comments on my LinkedIn posts. I reached out carefully. coffee meetings that looked like casual catch-ups. Sarah was the first to crack. "It's gotten worse since you left," she whispered, sliding a USB drive across the table. "They're targeting 20 more people this quarter." I copied the list. My name had been on a spreadsheet for 6 months before they called me in. 6 months of planning my destruction, calculating the exact pressure points that would make me crumble. But the spreadsheet showed more: projected insurance savings, bonus allocations for executives based on overhead reduction, even a column rating employees by their likelihood to sue. Tom provided financial documents showing the correlation between forced departures and executive bonuses. The quarter after the most voluntary leaves. C-suite compensation increased by 40%. Jennifer was the bravest, still employed, still at risk. She wore a wire to meetings. Legal discussions about risk assessment and exit strategies that had nothing to do with business planning and everything to do with human disposal. We built our case like a pyramid, each piece supporting the next. Jordan worked 18-hour days, fueled by rage and instant coffee. I cataloged evidence between bar shifts, my apartment becoming a war room of documents and charts. The others contributed what they could: testimonies, documents, connections to more victims. "We have enough," Jordan announced one night, 3 months after we'd started. "Enough for a class action that will destroy them." But I wanted more than destruction. I wanted humiliation. I wanted Linda Pearson's plastic smile to crack on national television. I wanted Tom Bradley to explain his lean and mean philosophy to a jury of people living paycheck to paycheck. I wanted the executives to feel what we felt: the cold grip of insecurity, the weight of worthlessness, the taste of desperation. So I kept gathering, kept recording, kept performing. I even called Tom Bradley, my old supervisor, thanking him for the growth opportunity. His discomfort was delicious. "Of course, Rachel. We always knew you'd land on your feet." I recorded every condescending word. The final piece came from an unexpected source. The janitor at Westlake, Marcus Washington, reached out through Sarah. He'd been emptying executive trash cans for 15 years, invisible to them, but watching everything. He had photographs of shredded documents he'd pieced together, recordings of conversations executives had while he mopped around them, treating him like furniture. One recording made Jordan actually gasp. The CEO, William Hartley, laughing with the CFO. "The beauty is, they blame themselves. They think they weren't good enough. By the time they realize it was orchestrated, they're too broke to fight back." We had them. We had them cold. Jordan filed the suit on a Thursday. 37 plaintiffs initially, with provisions for more to join, seeking damages for lost wages, emotional distress, punitive damages for systematic discrimination. The number he put on it made my eyes water: $47 million. But more importantly, he contacted someone else, an investigative journalist at the Havenbrook Herald who'd been sniffing around Westlake for years but could never get anyone to talk. Now, everyone was ready to talk, and I had the documents to prove every word. The call came at 2 a.m. on a Monday. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Miss Morgan?" The voice was nervous, young. "This is Ashley from IT Security at Westlake. I'm not supposed to. They're on to you." My blood turned to ice water. "What do you mean?" "They found out about the cloud access. They're doing a full audit. Tomorrow morning, they're going to trace every download, every login. They've hired a cybersecurity firm." I hung up and immediately called Jordan. "They know." "Pack everything," he said. "Documents, drives, everything. Bring it to my apartment. Now." I threw everything into boxes: months of evidence, printed emails, USB drives. My hands shook as I carried them to my car. The streets were empty at 3 a.m., but I kept checking the rearview mirror, paranoid that someone was following. Jordan was waiting with coffee and a grim expression. "We file for an emergency injunction first thing. They'll try to claim you stole proprietary information, make you the villain." By 9 a.m., Westlake's lawyers had sent a cease and desist letter. By noon, they'd filed charges for corporate espionage. Linda Pearson gave a statement to the press about a disgruntled former employee's illegal activities. The narrative was flipping. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a criminal. Tom Bradley called my personal phone. I recorded it, of course. Rachel, you've made a serious mistake. Return what you've taken, and maybe we can work something out. Work something out? I laughed. Like you worked things out for Maria Santos. You're destroying your future over a misunderstanding. No one will hire you after this. No one would hire me anyway. Tom. That was the point. Wasn't it? His voice turned cold. You have no idea who you're fighting. We have resources you can't imagine. We'll bury you in legal fees before this ever sees a courtroom. Sarah Martinez texted me that night. Security is reviewing everyone's emails. They're interrogating anyone who had contact with you. I'm scared. The intimidation escalated. My landlord suddenly found violations in my lease. My car tires were slashed. No cameras, no witnesses. Mom received calls about insurance irregularities that threatened her treatment coverage. The bar where I worked got an anonymous health department complaint. Pete pulled me aside during my shift. I can't afford trouble. Rachel, after tonight, you're done. I lost my last source of income with rent due in 5 days. Jordan was getting it worse. His freelance clients mysteriously canceled contracts. His apartment was broken into, nothing stolen, but everything searched. A message was clear. We know where you live, what you have, how vulnerable you are. They're trying to break us before the Herald story runs, Jordan said, reviewing security footage of unmarked cars outside his building. Classic intimidation tactics. But Jennifer Liu inside legal was our guardian angel. She fed us intelligence. They're panicking. The board is asking questions. Stock analysts are sniffing around. Don't give up. Then came the meeting request. William Hartley himself, CEO of Westlake, wanted to meet. Neutral ground, a conference room at a downtown hotel. Don't go, Jordan warned. It's a trap. But I went, wearing a wire backed up to 3 different cloud services. Hartley looked exactly like his corporate photos, silver-haired, distinguished, with eyes like a winter morgue. Linda Pearson sat beside him, no longer smiling. Miss Morgan, he began, you're clearly intelligent, which makes your current path puzzling. My current path? Mutual assured destruction. You release those documents. We pursue criminal charges. Everyone loses. 37 people already lost, I said. More are losing right now. He leaned back, studying me like I was a spreadsheet with problematic numbers. What do you want? Money? Your job back? We can be reasonable. I want you to admit what you did, publicly. I want compensation for everyone you forced out. I want the practice to stop. Linda actually laughed. That's not how the world works, Rachel. No, I said, standing up. That's how your world works, but your world is about to change. They didn't know about Marcus Washington's recordings. They didn't know the Herald had everything. They didn't know that 3 more employees had come forward that week with evidence. They thought they were negotiating from strength. Hartley's final words were meant to terrify me. You're going to regret this. I promise you that. I already have a lifetime of regrets, Mr. Hartley. What's one more? That night, someone threw a brick through my apartment window with a note. Final warning. I sat among the broken glass, holding the brick, and thought about giving up. I was broke, exhausted, terrified. They had everything: money, lawyers, power. I had anger and evidence that might not be enough. Then my phone buzzed. A message from David Park. Just saw the draft of the Herald story. It's beautiful. We're going to win. Another from Maria. My daughter asked why I'm crying. I told her sometimes people fight back. Thank you. Rebecca. Whatever happens, you gave us dignity again. I looked at the brick in my hands. They wanted me scared, silent, disappeared. But I'd already lost everything they could take. My job, my security, my faith in the system. What I'd found was something they couldn't steal. solidarity with others who'd been crushed by the same machine, purpose beyond surviving day to day, and the cold certainty that sometimes burning it all down is the only warmth you'll get. Jordan texted at midnight. Harold runs the story tomorrow. Front page, be ready. I swept up the glass, covered the window with cardboard, and sat down at my laptop. One more email to send, this time to every Westlake employee I'd ever known. Tomorrow, you'll read about what Westlake Connect has been doing. Some of you knew, some suspected, some will be shocked. But all of you have a choice now. Stay silent and be complicit, or stand up and be counted. They can't fire everyone. They can't silence us all. See you on the other side. I hit send and waited for dawn, for the story that would either save us or destroy us completely. The Havenbrook Herald's headline screamed across the morning edition: Westlake's workforce purge, inside the systematic elimination of employees. The story ran 3 full pages, with my photo next to testimonies from 17 former employees. By 7 a.m., it was trending online. By 9 a.m., Westlake's stock had dropped 12%. The courtroom was packed for the emergency hearing. Jordan had managed to fast-track it based on the immediate and ongoing harm to current employees. I sat at the plaintiff's table, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes, former colleagues in the gallery, current employees who'd taken sick days to attend, journalists scribbling notes. Linda Pearson took the stand first. Jordan's cross-examination was surgical. Ms. Pearson, do you recognize this document? He showed the Strategic Workforce Reduction Protocol on the overhead screen. I don't recall. It has your digital signature, dated 18 months ago. Her plastic smile finally cracked. We develop many strategic documents. This one specifically outlines targeting employees who use medical insurance above average. Is that correct? That's taken out of context. Jordan pulled up an email. From you to Mr. Hartley. Rachel Morgan's mother's medical costs make her a prime candidate for voluntary separation. Did you write this? The courtroom murmured. Linda's face went white. I want my attorney. You have your attorney, Ms. Pearson. Answer the question. When William Hartley took the stand, he maintained his CEO composure until Jordan played Marcus Washington's recording. Hartley's own voice filled the courtroom. By the time they realized it was orchestrated, they're too broke to fight back. The judge's face darkened. Mr. Hartley, did you say those words? It was a private conversation taken out of context. The context seems quite clear. The judge interrupted. The devastating blow came from Jennifer Liu, who'd finally had enough. She walked into the courtroom during a recess with a banker's box of documents. Your Honor, she announced. I'm currently employed at Westlake's legal department. These are the original documents they're claiming were stolen. They were actually given to employees during their reviews, making them personal property. Furthermore, I have here written plans for targeting 40 more employees this quarter, including myself for cooperating with this investigation. Westlake's lead attorney objected frantically. But the damage was done. Jennifer had legal standing to submit the documents. She'd also just thrown away her career to give us the killing blow. Tom Bradley was the last to testify. He tried to maintain that everything was about performance optimization. But Jordan had my performance reviews. 6 years of exceeds expectations until the month before my forced leave. Mr. Bradley, what changed in Ms. Morgan's performance in that final month? She seemed stressed. Could that stress relate to her workload tripling after you eliminated 2 positions without replacement? We all had to do more with less. But you received a $50,000 bonus that quarter for overhead reduction, didn't you? The judge had heard enough. I'm prepared to rule on the injunction. Westlake Connect will immediately cease all forced leave practices. Any employee currently on unpaid leave will be reinstated with full back pay. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the Department of Labor for criminal investigation. The courtroom erupted. Maria Santos was crying. David Park hugged his elderly parents. Rebecca Thompson just sat there, stunned. as if she couldn't believe it was real. But Westlake's lawyers weren't done. Your Honor, Ms. Morgan accessed company systems without authorization. Ms. Morgan accessed systems her credentials still had permission for. Jordan interrupted. If Westlake failed to revoke access, that's negligence, not criminal behavior. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Linda Pearson tried to sneak out the back but was caught by cameras. Her statement was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. Westlake remains committed to employee well-being and will review our policies accordingly. The real victory came 3 days later. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. By evening, William Hartley had resigned to pursue other opportunities. Linda Pearson was transitioning to a consulting role. Corporate speak for fired with a gag order. Tom Bradley simply disappeared from the company directory. The Herald published a follow-up. Westlake stock plummets as federal investigation launched. The SEC was investigating financial fraud. The Department of Labor was pursuing criminal charges. 43 more employees had joined our class action. Jordan called me that night, exhausted but elated. Settlement offers are coming in. They want this to go away before more damage is done. How much? They're starting at $15 million for the class. It'll go higher. I sat in my broken apartment, cardboard still covering the window, and felt empty. Not disappointed, just drained. The rage that had fueled me for months had nowhere to go. Then my phone rang. Mom. Rachel, honey, I saw the news. Are you okay? I'm okay. Mom. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would have been too, fighting for what's right, even when it costs everything. That broke me. I cried for the first time since this started, not from sadness or fear, but from the sheer relief of being seen, of mattering, of proving that sometimes the Davids of the world can make Goliath bleed. The final settlement would take months to negotiate. But that night, sitting in my war-torn apartment with victory in hand, I remembered Linda's words from that first meeting. Perhaps you need time to gain perspective. She was right. This time had given me perfect perspective on how corporations devour people, on how fighting back costs everything, and on how sometimes destroying something corrupt is the only way to build something better. My phone buzzed with a text from Jordan. Celebration drinks? You're buying since we're about to be millionaires. I laughed, genuinely, for the first time in months. I know a bar. Owner's a friend. He just hired me back with a raise. The war was won, even if the battle scars would last forever. And Linda Pearson? She'd have plenty of time for her own voluntary leave to think about how badly she'd underestimated the desperate. After all, we had nothing left to lose. The afternoon sun hit my face as I walked out of the federal courthouse for the last time. 6 months had passed since that first Herald headline, and the final settlement had just been approved. $31 million distributed among 127 plaintiffs. My share, after legal fees, would be enough to pay off Mom's medical bills, clear my student loans, and leave me with breathing room I hadn't had in years. Linda Pearson stood by a black town car in the parking lot, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. Her power suit couldn't hide the defeat in her shoulders. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something I never expected. Fear. She quickly got into the car and disappeared into traffic. Probably forever. The news vans were still there, wanting final statements. Ms. Morgan, how does it feel to have won? I thought about the word won. My career at Westlake was dead. My resume would forever be marked by this fight. I'd aged 5 years in 18 months. Mom's health had deteriorated during the worst of the stress. Some nights, I still woke up in a panic, calculating bills that were already paid. Justice doesn't erase trauma, I said into the microphones, but it does mean the next person might not have to suffer the same way. Jordan stood beside me, fielding questions about the legal precedent we'd set. 3 states were already drafting legislation to prevent constructive dismissal through forced leave. The Department of Labor had created new guidelines for investigating systematic workplace discrimination. Westlake's stock never recovered. They'd eventually be absorbed by a competitor. Their name erased from the building I'd once entered with such hope. That evening, I met the others at O'Malley's. Pete had reserved the back room for us, his way of apologizing for having to let me go during the intimidation period. Maria Santos brought her daughter, who was starting college next year with the settlement money. David Park had his wife with him. They were trying for another baby, finally able to afford the treatments. Rebecca Thompson looked like a different person. The anxiety replaced with something like peace. "We should hate them for what they took from us," Rebecca said, raising her beer. But I refused to let them own any more of my emotions. They've gotten enough. Marcus Washington, the janitor who'd provided crucial recordings, sat quietly in the corner. Westlake had tried to fire him during the lawsuit, but the whistleblower protections held. He'd become something of a legend among the support staff, the invisible man who'd seen everything and finally spoke. "You know what the strangest part is?" he said. "I still clean those offices. New executives, same offices. They treat me the exact same way, like I'm furniture. They have no idea I'm the reason their predecessors are gone." We laughed, dark and knowing. The system hadn't changed, not really. Westlake was one company among thousands doing the same thing. We'd won a battle in a war that would outlive us all. Jennifer Liu arrived late, looking tired but satisfied. She'd started her own employment law practice with her settlement money, specifically helping employees document workplace abuse. "I got 3 new clients today," she said. "All from different companies, all with the same story. The work continues." As the night wore on and the group thinned out, I found myself alone with Jordan at the bar. We'd been through hell together, bonded by shared rage and desperation. "What now?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "I spent so long fighting, I forgot to plan for after." "The Herald offered you a position, investigative researcher, decent pay, good benefits, and God knows you've proven you can dig up dirt." I'd gotten the offer that morning, but hadn't processed it yet. Starting over at 35, in a completely different field, terrified me more than fighting Westlake ever had. "Fear is just another form of control," Jordan said, reading my hesitation. "Don't let them win that final victory." The next morning, I walked into the Herald's building. It felt different from Westlake, older, shabbier, but somehow more honest. No motivational posters, no talk of family or culture. Just people doing work that mattered, or trying to. My new desk was small, shared with another researcher, with a view of a brick wall. The salary was less than what I'd made at Westlake, but the health insurance was solid and nobody expected me to work weekends unless the story demanded it. My first assignment was investigating wage theft at local restaurants. Small story, affecting people who couldn't afford lawyers, who didn't know their rights. People like I'd been, grinding themselves to dust for companies that saw them as disposable. I thought about that Monday morning in Linda Pearson's office, how she'd said I needed a long vacation to realign myself. She'd been right, in a way she never intended. That forced absence had aligned me perfectly, with my anger, my purpose, and the understanding that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to power is survive its attempt to destroy you. 3 years have passed since then. Westlake Connect doesn't exist anymore, absorbed and dissolved like a poison the corporate body finally rejected. I still work at the Herald, still digging up corporate crimes, still fighting variations of the same fight. Mom lived to see the settlement, but passed 6 months later. At least her final days were comfortable, dignified, free from financial terror. Sometimes I Google my former colleagues. Tom Bradley works at a small firm in another state, his LinkedIn carefully scrubbed of his Westlake years. Linda Pearson disappeared entirely from public view. Rumor says she moved to Florida, living off her severance, probably telling herself she was just following orders. William Hartley wrote a book about ethical leadership that no one bought. And me? I'm still here, still angry, still fighting. because that's what they never understood about their long vacation strategy. When you take everything from someone, you also take their fear of losing. And a person with nothing to lose is the most dangerous person in the world. The vacation they couldn't afford became the revenge they couldn't survive. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Rachel's situation? Your stories and experiences matter too. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight.